It'll look better that way.
Yeah.
Oh, you need three, right?
You want this one?
Yeah, thank you.
They have a.
Are you gonna be at the podium or in a chair?
I'll be with you. Morning, everyone.
Morning.
Testing 1, 2.
Objective in-house base.
Yeah, put this a little over here.
Turn that off.
How's everyone?
Good.
Good. Brave people up at 8 a.m., 7 a.m., 6 a.m. So if you folks are on social, this is streaming out live on my Twitter, my LinkedIn, YouTube, and there'll be a recording afterwards. So great. Thanks. This is great. This is a real energy lifter for 8:30 a.m. Maybe let's start with some introductions before we dive into the agenda. When we start.
Ladies first, though.
Oh, okay.
Good morning. I'm Kelly McMillan. I'm Director of Global Partners over at 5-9. We're focused on the TSB route to market. Also the founder of Exposure, Inclusion, and Diversity Council, the industry's first business resource group focused on mentorship and education and helping with sustainability in the channel too, to get new minds, new energies into our space.
Awesome.
I'm Chad Dixon, Vice President of Corporate Marketing for Tolares, pronounced Tolares. And my goal really is to help with the branding and messaging within the marketplace and to set ourselves up as a unique player within that space. From a diversity and inclusion standpoint, I was on the Inclusion Council that was founded by our CEO. And for me, the overarching goal from that standpoint is just to make sure that everybody has a comfortable experience within the channel and they feel like they have an opportunity to contribute.
Great. Well, maybe we start with some definitions, because I think everyone has a slightly different understanding of what diversity and inclusion means. Maybe start with you. What is your understanding? How do you describe diversity and inclusion as an initiative, as a concept, just to the general public? Because it's a little nebulous sometimes.
I can appreciate that. You're right. It is 2023 and we still are having these conversations. So just to kind of set the tone, when I think of diversity, equity, and inclusion, I always add in the A. So it's kind of my thing to say DE&I plus A, because diversity obviously is diversity of thought, diversity of experience, diversity of culture, right? Equity is having a seat at the table, also being understanding that seat at the table not only comes compensation wise, but also that you're going to listen to my experience and my thoughts, take that into consideration as we build out strategies to move forward within our organizations or communities. Inclusion means that we're going to bring a variety of people to that space, and those people are going to be comfortable when they come into interactions with us as an organization or a community. And then allyship, none of this can be done without allies, because more often than not, allies are the ones who kind of hold in, I don't want to say the purse strings, but they kind of have created some of these spaces. And without allyship, it's that invitation to come in and that invitation to expound on the DE&I principles aren't really there.
That's a great point. Chad, you want to add something there?
Yeah, she pretty much covered everything.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's the Kelly show.
Yeah, well, I'm just here. And again, one of the things I definitely wanted to touch on was that it's an initiative. It's relatively new. It's in its nascent standing within the business world. I mean, we've gone through the 80s of quote-unquote affirmative action and then other steps that have led to where we are today. However, she touched on it, allyship is probably the most important part. And then I'll add the last thing, and I'll probably touch on it later, is just that there has to be metrics associated with it. It can't just be an initiative that looks great on paper. It actually has to have a business reason for existing, and it has to be something that you look at year over year and say whether or not we are progressing toward whatever goals that you set. It can't be just we hired somebody who's a person of color or a woman or something along those lines and we're done. It has to be, is this helping the business move forward? And if not, then is this a program that's right for our business? And if those things aren't being measured, then it's not necessarily a program that's right maybe for your company or even for the space that you're in.
Yeah, that's such a great point. And let's talk about the business side. And so this sounds all well and good to a lot of people, but on the business end, why do businesses need to embrace diversity, inclusion, engage with a wider community. It's not just about good social sense, good politics, good whatever. It's about good business sense. What's it again?
Yeah, and I'll pull from experiences outside the channel. One of the things, I had the opportunity to work for Disney for a while, and then started broadcasting as well. One of the things that we noticed that when you have a diverse room, and diversity means diversity both of the ethnic backgrounds, but also of the thought process it takes to actually market a product, when you're able to pull all of those individuals into a room and ask, how do you market A, or how do you tackle issue B? Having those different viewpoints really helps you to put forward a comprehensive solution that allows you to get to whatever you're trying to get to faster, whether it's more money, whether it's reducing cost, whatever those things are. And if that doesn't happen, you still can come to a reasonable solution, but a lot of times you miss a little something by not having a room that's filled with people who have different viewpoints. And again, those viewpoints can't be so contradictory that you can't get to a solution, but it's more so about getting to a point where everybody gets to a consensus. And then from there, you're able to move forward with a solution that makes the most sense. But having those different viewpoints absolutely helps. And again, within the channel, we're working towards that, I think, more and more. But again, the ideal is it's not just, hey, we have, again, a box that's been checked and therefore, they're at the table, but not really having an opportunity to say much or contribute, but it's about looking at all of those different viewpoints and being able to pull those together to get to a solution.
Yeah, what I would add to that is Forbes wrote an article a few years ago that's still applicable today. When you have a diverse room, you're going to increase the opportunity and your reach by 20 to 30% at a minimum, because you have a diverse room and you're looking at it through a lens of other people's experiences, other communities, and how they approach solutions or finding a solution for things, right? In addition to that, you have more and more today, especially in our space, telecommunications technology, our customers don't look like the leadership at the organizations that they are trying to get to, right? And so there has to be a bridge, there has to be a conduit so that there's some continuity about this community. I can't go into, for instance, we're in Florida, the primary language, although this is still America, the primary language is Spanish, right? In most of these cities and surrounding. So that means as an English speaking person, I'm already at a disconnect because I don't speak the current language of my customer. So I can't expect that I'm going to continue to grow revenues in Florida if I don't adapt to that model and to this community that needs me here. That means I'm going to have to find Spanish speaking first language, most likely, to come in and make an impact here, because my English speaking Houstonian self is not going to do that in the same way. Now, will I be able to help them with some things that I've seen in my market? Of course, but there should be, that's where equity comes in. They should be able to take the lead. The right people should be able to take the lead in the communities that need us to serve them best.
Yeah, that's a great point. Let's talk about the talent side, because that's where it all begins in terms of creating more inclusive, equitable workplaces, attracting and recruiting diverse talent, right? How are companies doing in that regard? We're now in a bit of a tech meltdown, so it's probably not the best time to talk about recruiting when we're actually laying off people. We'll come to that later, but why is it important to attract a diverse workforce? Kelly, you want to take that first?
Yeah, I mean, to attract a diverse workforce, Chad broke that down. I would say that to do that, though, you have to cast a wide net. We can't continue just to ping friends and family and communities who look like us. You're going to get the same experience. You're not going to get a varied
It's all word of mouth. It's all
word of mouth.
referrals,
It's all incestuous. This is the channel. It's
especially in this industry.
Yeah. And so this indirect model. However, if you want to be able to grow 30% year over year, and even especially in a market like we're in right now, where we're having so many financial headwinds that are causing meltdowns all across multiple verticals, it would behoove us to take a lens into various colleges and organizations that are, helping some young people come up. Also really paying attention to maybe not, did this person have the same title at the organization that they were at, Or do they have transferable skills that can apply to the world that I need them to do today, right? What are their experiences? Have they, maybe managed a scenario like this or whatnot? And actually really having a comprehensive conversation with your applicants versus just, oh, that's so and such and such a son, it'll be fine. I think that we have to really cast a wider net. So that means you got to look in different places when you're recruiting. You got to post your jobs in different places. And then when those people come in, they may not have that same title. It doesn't mean that they can't do the job, but their skill sets and experiences don't set them apart.
Yeah, that's such a great point. And Chad, what do you think about what's happening on the hiring recruiting side today? What can we do differently, in your opinion?
I would say that the word I would use is intentionality, in that if you have programs set aside for individuals who, whether it's a person of color, whether it's a woman, whether it's a younger person coming into the channel, the ideal is that you have to recruit, to your point, where they are. If you only recruit at a certain type of college or a certain location, you're going to get qualified applicants. I mean, that's just part of the process, but it's a question of, are there other qualified applicants that reach a different segment of the population? And if you're never recruiting in those areas, then you will never find those people. And vice versa, if you're consistently recruiting in there, then you'll build a pipeline of people that when the opportunities come up and they're not in the room to have that conversation about whether or not they should be considered as an applicant, they're at the very least, their applications are in the system, so that if you start with your own database and say, hey, we're looking for, it's top of mind, we're looking for a product marketer, then you have a list of people who, in a pipeline, if you will, of diverse candidates already to pull from, that then you can say, all right, well, we have 10 people in here, and within that, just because you've already done the recruiting efforts initially, there will be a diverse set of people that you can pull from. In addition, just internally, you have to look at your own base of employees. Do you have people in your company who do an excellent job, but for whatever reason, they're not at a conference where they have an opportunity to have FaceTime with their immediate managers or even higher level managers? Are they still employees, though, that you would consider for other positions, but they're never, if you will, having that FaceTime opportunity with upper management, so that when a role opens up, they're one of the people that has the opportunity to be selected for interviews? You'll be surprised sometimes how many people are really rock stars that are looking to take that next step up, who are in your own organizations, but for whatever reason, they're just never thought of, other than they perform really well in their one segment, rather than the multiple segments or higher level opportunities that are there, because again, they're just not talked about. You talk about people, to your point, who are friends. That's my cousin. He's doing a great job. Versus there's a person over here who's doing an excellent job, but he's doing an excellent job there. Let him stay there, and that's fine. There's has to be sometimes some, again, intentionality of saying, hey, we have an open role internally. Who is the best possible candidates, and who are we not thinking about right now that might be a great candidate for that role, that again, may or may not look like my cousin or whatever have you.
I have a comment, sorry. I also think we have a responsibility to keep our pipelines for new hires open until we have diverse representation. So like Chad said, if we're just posting in the same place and we're just hearing the same applicants over and over again, I think the hiring managers and management has a responsibility to keep their pipelines open until, and to seek out more diverse sources of talent until, and not close the pipeline, not close the talent pipeline until it has a representative population of folks in it to be considered.
I agree. And I think that also allows you to, like, that consultative approach. It allows you to really say, okay, we have 5 different applicants from various backgrounds, and you might fill more than one role, right? Like you might actually have this pool of applicants that's so amazing that you can that you can look and say, oh, well, this other one is coming up, or this person can maybe fit this need too, right? So yeah, I love that.
I think hiring these days often doesn't even involve people. It involves AI, it involves algorithm, it involves screening of applicants, which I think is terrible for a lot of reasons. But one in particular is it screens out folks who don't have the right keywords, the right metrics, or the right education in their background. Do we need to humanize this process a bit? Because this is a terrible way to hire, is through a computer.
It is a terrible way, but I will tell you that a lot of organizations, even before the kind of formalized approach of DEI back, I would say in 2019, 2018, they were already starting to change job applications online and the prerequisites for that job, right? They were saying 2 years, 2-year education or 4-year degree or 2 years of experience, right? Or, it was like there was a wider base. You were able to pull a wider base of applicants is what I'm trying to say. Like it didn't just say you had to have a 4-year degree or whatever, right? The ones that had variances, 4 years degree or 8 years experience. And so then you could cast a wider net. And I think that's something that I wanted to touch on too. We're talking about the applicants from the view of the corporate space. But as an applicant, I also want to know that you have those considerations. I also want to know that you're taking into consideration my experience, not just my education level. I also want to know whether you have ERGs. I want to know if you have an inclusion committee. I want to know if this is going to be a safe space for me to go and spend my time. Because while an organization has to spend 90 to 180 days teaching someone about their organization, getting them comfortable, all the things, as an applicant and a new hire, I also have to spend that same amount of energy. And I might be leaving an organization that didn't have all those things, but you never know what organization you're jumping into. So I want to make sure that it's an inclusive space. It's a safe space for me to land too.
From the AI standpoint, it's a game, and it's actually has always been that way since that has actually been the preferred method for HR professionals to screen applications. And I'm going to tell jokes, so bear with me. But bottom line, it's not a bad joke, but it's just more so. My name is Chad. I went to the University of Maine. If you don't see me, what comes to mind? It's not this. It's just what it is. So when it comes down to somebody looking at a resume and they see certain types of names, some are set up to, I hate to say this, but actually screen out certain people, certain surnames, certain addresses and zip codes to say that these are people that may not fit our culture. And a long time ago, I actually went on a internship at Coca-Cola. A lot of fun. The first day, though, was really interesting is that they had all of us in a room, and they were like saying everybody's name and stand up or whatever. And I said my name, and I stood up, and the guy just stood there. And then he said it again. I was like, and he said it again. I was like, that's me. Like, and he was like, oh, okay. And I just kind of chuckled, but part of that is the perceptions that HR will have. They'll still get a stack of names. They'll still get a stack of applicants. And there is a level of, it may not be intentional, but there's a level of bias and preferences as it pertains to certain names, certain schools, to your point, certain zip codes and locations that go into the hiring process. And a lot of times it's not malicious. It's not like, oh my goodness, I'm definitely trying to make sure that we don't have this type of person in our organization. It's more so just that we've hired from, the University of Arizona for the past 10 years, and we've got an absolutely great set of candidates from there. So if I see University of Arizona on an application, I'm putting that into the pile to move forward. And you may not do it consciously, but in your mind, you're still saying, well, the last 10 people we hired were absolutely great. Just move that forward. I'm pretty sure that they have, even to your point, they may not have all the qualifications, but they have that degree from that university. And that can go, though, for names, types, things of that nature. So to your point, adding a human aspect can be very positive. It can also sometimes have negative consequences. But that's part of having ERGs and things of that nature within your organization to help people understand certain biases. And I hate to use the word prejudices because it's not necessarily a negative, but it's just a matter of we all, to some degree, look at our own clan and say, we want to make sure that that clan moves forward and does well. And that clan could just be your neighborhood, it could be your state or whatever have you. But ultimately, you want to make sure that as little bias goes into the hiring process as possible, just so that you're getting the best candidates to move your organization forward. And if AI helps with that process, that would be great. In a perfect world, AI would be completely unbiased. They would just look at your qualifications and assume that they're pulling out the best candidates. But again, somebody's programming your AI. And that's sometimes that can be problematic.
Yeah, so two things. One, machine learning is programming your AI. And if you have those same metrics, if you're going to continuously utilize candidates from ASU over and over and over again, then that's what your AI is going to be biased towards, right? But the way that the human approach can go even further is during that hiring process and setting up a panel or setting up multiple people within your organization that you trust to vet your candidates, especially when they start to get to those, those next layers after HR and maybe after the immediate manager. Then people on the team should, interview that candidate, or set up a panel style so that multiple people can hear that candidate's responses and answers at the same time that are diverse to your organization as well, right? Now, that doesn't mean, pick the one, person of color all the time to sit on this panel, unless that person of color is maybe a VP that's managing this group in this department. Pick a variety of people from different levels, because this person also has is going to impact your culture, right, at the end of the day too. So you want to make sure your new hires see a good sense of who you are as an organization.
That's a great point. If I'm invited to sit on another mantle of 6 white dudes, I think I'm going to blow my top. Now I think there's some recognition that that's not good for a variety of reasons, but probably not enough. Let's name some names. Let's call out some companies who are doing a good job of diversity, equity, and inclusion practices, programs, and some are doing it bad. I won't ask you to speak badly of anyone, so I'll do it for you. But I've worked in 30 years in tech, and so I think big tech, right down the board, Apple, Facebook, Google, Amazon, I'll throw in Oracle, they're not doing a great job when it comes to hiring women in R&D, when it comes to hiring minorities, particularly African Americans in the business. And they've been kind of shamed to some degree, because you look at the data and it's kind of shocking. But other companies doing it well, excluding maybe some of the big tech players. Chad, do you want to take a thought of that?
Thanks. I would say Talaris is doing an absolutely killer job. My CEO's in the audience. But within the tech space, it's interesting in that a majority of the product leaders and if we're category leaders built their businesses in the same manner that a lot of the small and medium-sized businesses, in that they had a friend who at some point either lived in a neighborhood they've known from high school or college, you can go down the list. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they have a negative view of hiring of ethnic minorities or anything along those lines. It's just a matter of that's who they were next door to when they were growing up. That's who they've known through their social circles. So as they've grown their businesses, they've literally continued to span within that familial circle. And if there isn't a diverse circle, which doesn't necessarily mean anything negative, it's just a matter of that's who was around them. They will continue then, as we talked about, hire people who are within that circle and you expand and your business grows and things of that nature. So from a company standpoint, I don't know a lot of tech companies that I can say are absolutely killing it, but I would also say if you go online and look at a majority of the major corporations across any vertical, that there's usually sort of a cap on diversity. It's something I've noticed, my whole life, and I'm just like, I'm gonna get through. Promise myself. But it comes down to it is that once you reach usually vice president level and above, the diversity sort of stops. And that's just the reality of what you see right now. Some of the businesses that we think of, whether it's, something that's global, something like Nestle, whether it's Disney, whatever, they definitely are trying. But the ideal again is that we talked about before, pipelining. So if you started your diversity efforts in, we'll say, 2015, only now are you starting to see your pipeline come to fruition and people having the necessary experience to feel ready to have that discussion in the boardroom, to have that discussion with peers who they've come up in that business with. If you started it, say, in 1980, the olden days, then you should be at a point now where you have a bench that's deep enough that diversity shouldn't necessarily be an issue. It's just a matter of whether or not that person has comported themselves in a manner that will allow them to take those steps upward. And I hate to say it, but that's just the reality of business in the United States, but also business worldwide. If you look at other countries who have diversity and inclusion efforts, they're running to the same thing. If you look at BMW, Germany, things of that nature, like very rarely, if you look at their leaderships, unless it's leadership in other countries, but at their home office in Germany, it is, it's going to be, you're interviewing, it's going to be, what did you call it, a manual?
Mantle,
Mantle, yeah, a
Yeah.
mantle, like, it'll be that.
manpower.
Basically a series of white males who have been with that company, from the onset, working from factory all the way up to, upper management. And that's just a reality right now of the business structure. It's continued to change, and, conversation like this will help with that process and take the information that you get here, go back to your companies and try to implement if it's not happening already. But overall, I would love to get to a point, and I mean this very sincerely, where I'm never up here. I'm not having this
Oh my God, I was just
conversation.
thinking that, Jack,
Yeah.
literally.
That, it's not something that you think about, like, and I'll touch on them a little off topic real quick, like, you want to get to the point where somebody doesn't have to say, I don't see your color, or your background is, it doesn't matter. Like, yeah, it's just, hey, I'm a person, I'm qualified, hire me or don't hire me, whatever those merits are. Like, that to me matters more than anything else. And having those type of conversations, like, I can take rejection to say, hey, we're looking for somebody with 15 years of experience, you have 5, you're not qualified. Okay, like, that's not hurtful, but you never want to be, I have 15 years of experience, the job requires 5, and you hired your cousin who has 0. That's a problem. And at that point, you start saying to yourself, okay, there's something amiss here. But we'll get there. It's just generational. This is very generational. Like, each 20 to 30 years, you take a step forward, you take a step forward. And it's incremental, but it is happening. So I'm encouraged, but man, I'm hopeful that my generations below me, or behind me, I guess, that glass ceiling that you can see the highest levels of upper management becomes something that you can say it's attainable, and you're not thinking about it anymore. It's just whether or not I want to go get it or not. And that's
I mean, mic drop. That was amazing. The only thing I will add is I'm very much in agreement that these panels, I was just talking to my little people. I have a 10 and 7-year-old, and they're back in Texas, so it's an hour behind. They're headed to school, and they're like, Mommy, where are you? And I'm like, oh, I'm about to speak. Look, and my youngest, my 7-year-old's like, weren't you just there last year in that same room? And I was like, well, you have a really good memory. I share that with your mom, but yes, I was. And, this is a conversation that we continue to have. And it really goes back to what Chad said. You have to implement these things. It's a lot. This is our life. Okay, like, let's level set. This is my life. This is his life. This is our experience. That experience with Chad, someone thinking that he should look like someone else. My name is Kelly McMillan. Of course that's happened to me, right? I am, yes, Irish on my husband's side. But, it's very much a societal structure. And if we can understand that this isn't just a corporate conversation, but it is a community conversation. It is a human conversation. I work for 5'9", we're human first, and which is one of the reasons why I'm still within that organization. We're human first, and yes, it does take some time, but you have to be intentional and actionable about the steps that you're going to take to move forward to make it an inclusive space. Because chances are the relationship that you'll have with your colleagues, you'll build that relationship, they become your friends, and if that pool is diverse, then you're going to learn different things too. You're going to be elevated in a way that you didn't have preview into before, right? The other piece I would say is there is one organization that I feel like is doing a good job, and it's Cisco. Yes, they're a competitor, but they've been actively, because they are a global organization, 20, 30 plus years, they've actively created inclusive communities. And in fact, they don't call their ERGs employee resource groups, they call them communities. They are communities, and they make up multiple countries. And when we can get past ethnicity, we can get past color of skin, we can really understand the true differences and the things that make us better. And then all those other things just kind of melt away. Then we can start focusing on people with disabilities. We can start focusing on people with age bias. We can start focusing on people who need other things, right? Instead of just being looked at as a human to come to the table to apply for opportunities.
Oh, such a great point. And I remember talking to John Chambers when he was CEO, and he's from West Virginia, some of the poorest counties and towns in West Virginia. And he talked about the need to educate rural, poor, poor communities and enable them with broadband and try to lift them out of these communities. So that's a really interesting point. I guess my next thought is we live in a country of tremendous diversity, religion, ethnicities, cultures, races, obviously. But isn't it good for business to serve all of those customers and talk about customer experience at 5.9 with content and with people who know them and know their community, their culture, and have an affinity and understanding of those customers? I mean, isn't that what good business is?
I mean, that's exactly what good business is. That's what good technology is too, right? Is to help to break down barriers. So if, for instance, I shared that example earlier of Spanish speaking in a space. I also like the idea, blah, 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 blah. It's early, y'all. But I like the example I've used in the past of me walking into a hair salon, right? If I walk into a hair salon in a neighborhood adjacent to me or wherever, I live in downtown Houston, so it's very eclectic mix. But if I walk into a hair salon and the young lady that looks like me sees me, then I don't hardly have to say anything. It's like, good morning, how you doing? Awesome, what are you in for? Should I wash you? Blah, blah, blah. That's it, right? There's no, and then we can start just having a regular conversation. But if I walk into a hair salon and the young lady does not look like me, her hair isn't like mine, there's a whole 30-minute conversation that has to happen before we can even be on the same page. And so when you talk about this customer experience, you have to have a team that represents your customer in whatever market, whatever region, whatever community you're in, because it takes down that like wall that comes up when you are interacting with someone who you are probably going to assume doesn't understand your experience. That's a human experience. You're always going to put up a wall if you see or you feel like somebody may not quite understand you. Like you're gonna, okay, I gotta go explain this. But if the experience is the same, or if I kind of know you through another friend or something like that, it's a lot easier to broach that conversation. And it's probably a quicker, I mean, at the end of the day, we all have a number, I'm sure. So it's probably a quicker sell, it's an easier sell, and they feel more comfortable and confident with you because you have some sort of shared experience or background.
When it comes to, and again, my lens is marketing, representation in the images, in the tone, in the, and to some degree, even the dialect in which somebody receives the messaging that you're sending has a tremendous effect on how easy it is for anyone as a consumer to feel comfortable purchasing your product and to have that level of trust in your product because they feel as if you have a one-to-one relationship with that particular product, company, or service. So to your point, if a room is not filled with individuals who understand how to build that type of messaging, then you can still build that messaging, and we call it mass marketing, where you just put a message out that's, for lack of a term, relatively bland, but it does get your message and your point across. However, if you're trying to reach specific segments in the population, it absolutely matters how you speak to, where you advertise, how much money you put in certain segments in order to make sure that you're reaching those specific segments that you've identified as being lucrative for your business. And again, regardless of your ethnicity, your religion, whatever, we all have very specific needs and services that we're trying to get to. We all need water, we all need shelter, we all need internet. To me, that's essential. So to me, it's how do you have a representative experience from a marketing standpoint in order to get the messaging across. Very simple example, Comcast, years ago was going door to door to sell, their first levels of internet service. On the ground, boots on the ground. People go just knock on your door. Hi, I'm with Comcast. Are you interested in buying cable from us? Slam the door or have a conversation. And I had a friend of mine who was actually over, he used to call it the street team, but it was over a street team, and it was actually in Massachusetts. And it took.
I'm from Massachusetts.
Oh, that's on. And what he quickly found that if, and he used the example earlier, if you open the door and say, "Hi, I'm from Comcast," and the person just looks at you, it doesn't say anything. You say, "Well, I'm here to sell internet, and these are the products that we have," and they just look at you. If you aren't speaking the language of that individual, that conversation is going to end with either a door being slowly closed because they have no idea. However, it's like, "Hola, ¿cómo estás?" "Oh, estoy bien, ¿y tú?" And you move forward from there. And to be able to have a conversation, but that's just representation, but that's actually just good business. You would have missed out on a sale from somebody who was interested in buying your product simply because you didn't have that same representation. So he started doing demographic mapping of his area and said, "This area here, predominantly Spanish speaking, we're going to send our Spanish reps." I mean, it's revolutionary, but it made a difference. All of a sudden, the sales went through the roof, and people were asking questions. "How did you do it? Like, how did you figure this out? Like, how are you making sales in areas we've never been able to make sales in?" And he just sort of chuckled and was like, "It's magic." And, like you said, secret sauce. But the ideal, though, is just that taking the time to understand how to build messaging that's relevant to a specific area matters most. And I'll use a much more general example. We launched older company, so I'll say this, but we launched a product, I guess it was about 15 years ago, called ESPN3, in which you had the opportunity to tune in to see various sporting events depending on where you were located in the United States. So in order to sell that product at different locations, we actually had to look at the demographics viewing patterns to say that, interesting enough, during April, or even I should say during March, the second most watched programs are actually wrestling in Iowa for certain areas in the Midwest. So rather than going out and selling them basketball, you would go door to door and say, "Hey," to your local cable operator, "Do you know that your customers are actually trying to find wrestling content and having a tough time finding? We have a product for that. And this is how they can access it." And you walk them through that. You have to have a compelling value proposition in order to make sure that they're willing to hear that messaging. But by showing them the data that says, "This is where your customers are, this is how you can reach them, and this is how you can make money," almost everybody is at least willing to have that conversation. But again, you have to tell your messaging to the individual that you're trying to reach. So again, if you don't take the time out and you do mass marketing, you can still be very successful. Most companies, 1920 all the way through 1980 and beyond, very much mass messaging, because again, the consumer base in the United States alone was that mostly white males were making certain types of decisions and white females were making other decisions, and because they also had most of the economic power. There's been a slight shift in that, and there's been a understanding of some of the economics behind that shift in what people were spending money on and who was spending. But ultimately, if you did mass marketing, you literally had a very good chance of being a successful company. And it's only through 80s and beyond that they started to look at different demographics and be able to say, "Hey, if we want to service a product within a specific area, it behooves us then to change the messaging, change the representation, change the images that are within that advertising space in order to relate directly to who we're trying to sell in order to boost sales." But make no mistake, every business, every person is here to do one thing, and that's to make money. So everybody's money is green at the end. You have to think about, how do I reach the people that are a growing segment and have the spending power? And anything else past that is just kind of superfluous.
That's a great point. And I'm actually streaming this on Twitter, where I have 300,000+ followers. So, I'll get quite a reaction, a lot of positive, but also a lot of negative. And how did DEI become so politicized over the years? We're talking about why it's good for business and making money, as you say, and it's good for the corporate culture and customers and all the, but it's also become so politicized that there's this backlash. Like I'll get backlash, from people talking about diversity. Is it just become like a left-right issue like everything else now? And how can we detach it from politics? Because it shouldn't be an issue in my mind, but it's become one.
I'm gonna think about this. You want to start on what you want?
And I can give my thoughts too, if you
I would say that overall, past 10 years or so, the discourse within at least the United States has become a lot more fractured than it had been in the past. But only from the standpoint that it's much more vocal. You can actually be a team of one and have a huge impact on national and sometimes even international events by simply, to your point, streaming to 300,000 people or something along those lines. You can amplify your message. When it comes to diversity, this has been an issue. Again, I used affirmative action in the 80s as an example that really started in the 60s from the civil rights movement as sort of an outreach from that. But there were individuals, and take this how you will, who are both positive and negative, and I'm not saying necessarily a political party or anything along those lines, who look at any kind of change in the economics of our country as a potential negative. And regardless of where you lean, whether it's left or right, there's a certain amount of scarcity economics that goes into how you perceive companies and their structure and who is going to be management, who isn't, because obviously as you rise up within any company, there is an economic incentive to stay, higher salaries, better benefits, things of that nature. So as it becomes a flashpoint for individuals to look at ERGs, to look at just diversity overall, the ideal that a piece of that pie that has been reserved mostly for white males, again, throughout the history of the United States, and that even a piece of that is being eroded to, I hate to use the term, but given to other people, whether they've earned it or not, that's, the discussion for another time, can be a scary paradigm shift for some people. And any kind of paradigm shift has had, I won't necessarily say adverse, but definitely effects on the psyches of individuals who were affected on both sides of the ledger. I'll use something a little bit more benign, but the pandemic forcing people to move out of office spaces and to work from home was a huge paradigm shift for most businesses. Depending on how flexible your business was really a direct result of how easy it was for you to make decisions to how do you move your personnel to a different. But that was a huge paradigm shift, and a lot of companies were not prepared, and they failed. Their employees became disgruntled, they left, they looked, or others were like, I won't change, you will show up in the office. And they lost employees. They saw some of their best employees were able to find other opportunities to do the same thing at a place where they felt comfortable. But again, that is a huge paradigm shift mentally for some people to wrap their heads around. And depending how you look at it, it was mandated by the government, we can't do that, that kind of thing. Or it was, hey, this is an opportunity for us to move forward and to test out some things that we've talked about. Wow, what are the first workforce? And I'm not talking about just diverse, I'm talking so much diverse geographically. What would that look like for our company? Are we able to now recruit from different places? Because they don't all have to come to our home office in Arizona or in Texas or something along those lines. Let's try it out. It just depends on your level of flexibility. So some people just in general, and some people, who happen to have more money and run certain companies are just simply saying, I am not flexible. I am not interested in changing the paradigm of what we've done because it has worked and it has put
To be politically correct, that I don't want to go politically.
Yeah.
That's the other line that you hear. Have you thought of running for office, Chad? I think
He's
you
very
need a senator too.
Yeah,
New senator, yeah.
my lens is going to be a little different. My lens is that you made a point that you shared that this country was built by and for white males, right? So race is a social construct, right? And I think that over the last 10 or 15 years where we have more visibility, it lends that we're going to have to answer to how we got to this place anyway. And we're also going to lend that we have to talk about there's a group of people that are going to have to give up privilege, because technically we shouldn't be where we are right now. If we are 100%, if we're honest, transparent, my grandfather's grandfather was either a sharecropper and then his grandfather was a slave, right? Not an indentured servant, not someone who came over here by choice, which is some of the textbooks are saying now, and chose to work for free. I think that it's become politicized because we don't want to have the conversations about how we actually got here. No, we never talk about that. We never talk about why this construct is this way and why.
Especially at tech conferences.
Especially,
we don't ever talk about this.
And
that's why this is pretty unique.
Why it is unique, but it's a fact. It's not like some crazy myth thing that happened in history that nobody can prove. It's an actual fact. And so if we take those things into consideration, it's going to mean that we have to have some really difficult conversations, not just the overlay of it's right because a society says, or it's right because of business. It's right because we're all humans first. We bleed the same, and more often than not, I have more in common with Adam than I do with Chad if you look at biology, maybe even experience, where we grew up, those similarities might be widely different, even though our skin color on the outside says something different. So for me, the thought is that we have to get past the race social construct. We actually, if we just get to know each other for who we are, and if we actually take this human approach, which technology was supposed to do, but I mean, there's AI, so we can talk about that later on this afternoon. But if we take that human approach, then we'll realize that we are really the same. But it is going to mean that the things that I have to do, the things that Chad has to do, as far as working extra hard, having multiple degrees, having multiple years of experience, then you actually have to create a playing field that says that, no, you're not gonna hire your cousin that doesn't have any experience. You're gonna hire the person with the experience, with the education, and give them a true shot at the opportunity.
Awesome. Well, that's a very profound note to kind of summarize this discussion. We only have a few minutes left, so any questions for the audience? Anyone? Okay. Time for coffee?
Excellent.
Okay, thanks so much,
Thank you.
guys. Really.
Thank you.
You guys?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oops.
Literally a
Mic drop.
That was awesome, you guys.
Yeah. Great. Way to tackle the topics. Yeah.
That's how you guys are talking about it. I took a picture of
Good.
it.
Thank you.
Nobody wants to hear it. Like, people